Testing a next-generation fighter jet on an aircraft carrier deck is not a routine event. It is a public signal. It tells the world exactly where the U.S. Navy wants to go, what threats it is preparing for, and how it plans to maintain control over the world's most contested oceans. This single test on the USS Gerald Ford exposes a strategy to tie naval and air dominance into one unified combat network built around the future centerpiece of the carrier air wing. This test becomes a turning point in how the Navy plans to fight and win in the Indo-Pacific against a peer competitor like China. The moment that new jet touches down on the Ford, it stops being a concept and becomes a real tool the Navy can integrate into its power projection machine. It is ready to operate from the most important platform the U.S. Navy fields. This signals to adversaries that the Navy is preparing for a future where air superiority, long-range strike, and multi-domain warfare flow through one jet that commands both manned and unmanned assets at once. The stakes are not abstract. The Navy faces a growing threat from China's anti-access systems, long-range missiles, and expanding carrier fleet. The Indo-Pacific is enormous, and the distances mean carriers must operate far from home. A next-generation fighter with longer range, better sensors, and AI-enabled battle management reduces the fear that U.S. carriers will be pushed out of the fight. This test proves the Navy is adapting now. The test solves a problem. Older fighters cannot meet the demands of environments shaped by advanced missile systems and dense surveillance networks. If carriers cannot launch aircraft that can outrun, outthink, and outdetect the enemy, the carriers themselves become vulnerable targets. The Navy cannot afford to risk a multi-billion-dollar carrier or the lives of thousands of sailors because its air wing cannot break through an anti-access area denial A2AD shield. Testing the next-generation fighter on a deck shows a clear solution. Extend the carrier's operational reach, keep it outside the enemy's missile envelope, and still strike effectively. Naval leaders state the future air wing must include a mix of 4th, 5th, and 6th generation aircraft, anchored by the FAXX, to stay dominant. Without a next-gen fighter acting as the quarterback of a manned-unmanned team, the carrier strike group loses strategic depth. This validation is a necessity driven by China expanding its carrier fleet, fielding the J-35, and deploying long-range anti-ship missiles. This is about understanding how modern conflict is fought, using distributed networks, autonomous systems, long-range sensors, and rapid decision cycles.
Before we get to that, I need your help. I'm trying to hit 50,000 subscribers by the end of the year, and I need your help. So I would really appreciate it if you could subscribe and help me out.
The urgency comes from the fact that this fighter is built for speed, reach, and survivability in environments where older jets would not last minutes. Its longer range increases the carrier's operational bubble, allowing it to stay far beyond missile threat zones while still projecting power. Its sensors let it lead a distributed force of drones acting as loyal wingmen, extending its eyes and weapons. Its AI-driven battle management allows it to coordinate multi-domain fires faster than human reaction times alone. The test on the Gerald Ford proves the Navy is ready to merge cutting-edge aviation with a ship designed for next-gen warfare. It validates the entire manned-unmanned teaming approach in a real naval context. The single platform becomes the central node in a networked force designed to survive and win. The fighter's range expands the strike group's reach. Its sensors strengthen sea control. Its teaming with drones creates layered offense and defense. Its battle management unifies the air, surface, and electronic warfare pictures. This has direct consequences for the Indo-Pacific. The region demands long-range aviation and survivability. Missile threats demand distributed operations. Testing this fighter proves the Navy is ready to fight on those terms. It signals that carriers will not be pushed aside by land-based missile systems. The carrier strike group is evolving into a mobile, networked combat system capable of projecting power across thousands of miles. Carriers remain viable because they now operate with aircraft capable of outthinking, outreaching and outfighting the threats of tomorrow. When a new U.S. fighter faces its first carrier-based trials, the real test is whether the aircraft can survive the most unforgiving environment in military aviation, the deck of an aircraft carrier. These trials force the fighter to prove that it can handle brutal landings, violent launches, corrosive salt air, and non-stop high-tempo operations. If a fighter can't survive these stresses, it doesn't matter how advanced it looks on paper, carrier-based trials expose the truth. Landing on a moving deck is nothing like landing on a runway. The fighter hits the deck at a high sink rate, slams into the arresting cable, and must stop within a tiny distance. That shock is violent. Only rugged, reinforced landing gear can survive it. Carrier-based trials show whether next-gen fighters are built with the toughness needed to endure thousands of these hits without structural failure. A failed landing endangers the pilot, the crew on the deck, and the entire rhythm of the carrier's operations. The sea destroys anything that isn't prepared for it. Corrosion is constant. Salt air creeps into every seam and cable. Carrier-based trials expose weaknesses fast. If a fighter's materials, coatings, or seals can't resist corrosion, it will degrade long before combat even begins. The solution is powerful. Fighters must use corrosion-resistant alloys, reinforced structures, and protective coatings specifically designed for the naval environment. Without these, even the most advanced aircraft becomes unreliable. Carrier decks are small, crowded, and always in motion. Fighters must fit into tight spots and taxi efficiently. That is why foldable wings aren't optional. They are essential. They allow the aircraft to be stored and moved efficiently, supporting the high sortie rate that defines naval power. Carrier-based trials confirm whether a fighter's folding mechanism is smooth and reliable under harsh weather. If the mechanism jams or fails, the fighter becomes a liability instead of a tool. Naval strategy emphasizes that carrier air wings depend on durable, adaptable aircraft to maintain sea control. Carrier-based fighters must survive both physical stress and enemy threats simultaneously. The sea is only one danger. Missiles, drones, and electronic warfare systems all target the carrier strike group. Trials help ensure that future fighters can integrate advanced sensors, secure communication links, and battle networks while still functioning in the brutal maritime environment. The most advanced system is useless if it can't function reliably at sea. Today's contested maritime theaters demand fighters that operate flawlessly under stress. Carrier-based trials simulate these pressures before an aircraft ever sees combat. They force the fighter to prove that it can launch quickly, recover safely, and sustain operations during prolonged missions. The tempo is relentless. Without flawless reliability, the entire carrier becomes vulnerable. Engineers measure how the fuselage flexes when the aircraft slams onto the deck. They analyze how saltwater spray affects control surfaces. They test avionics against electromagnetic interference from the ship's radar systems. Only through this process can the Navy confirm that a fighter is battle-ready.
Before we get to that, I need your help. I'm trying to hit 50,000 subscribers by the end of the year, and I need your help. So I would really appreciate it if you could subscribe and help me out.
Carrier-based trials also validate the integration of new technology. Future fighters are expected to manage advanced sensors, long-range weapons, and data-sharing networks. These systems must function reliably during launch and recovery. Shock, vibration, and electromagnetic noise can interfere with delicate electronics. Trials reveal whether the aircraft systems remain stable under pressure. These trials ensure that next-gen fighters can maintain their technological edge even in the harshest conditions. Carrier-based trials are essential because they prove that future U.S. fighters can operate in the world's most extreme aviation environment. They confirm that the aircraft can survive rapid launch and recovery cycles, handle maritime threats, and sustain the high readiness demanded by modern naval warfare. In contested and remote theaters, reliability is everything. These trials ensure that future fighters are not just advanced. They are ready for the sea, ready for combat, and ready for the mission. Naval integration gives the next-gen fighter advantages that landlocked adversaries simply cannot copy. The question is how a fighter launched from a moving runway in the middle of the ocean can outrun, outlast, and outfight platforms operating from massive fixed air bases. The answer reveals a truth that shifts how thinkers view power projection and survivability. For nations locked out of maritime mobility, this reality feels like a constant threat. They know their fighters cannot reach the fight quickly, cannot stay on station for long, and cannot move freely without crossing predictable corridors. But for a naval fighter launching from a carrier, the sea erases the problem. The ocean becomes the runway, the fuel station, and the forward base. Fixed bases can be targeted, restricted, or politically blocked. Carriers solve that by moving the entire base into international waters where no permission is needed. That mobility alone gives a next-gen naval fighter a level of operational freedom that landlocked adversaries cannot replace. The most powerful advantage is mobility. A naval fighter deployed from a carrier can appear off a coastline without warning. Landlocked adversaries cannot reposition massive air bases overnight. They cannot project influence across oceans without diplomatic permission. A naval fighter launched from a carrier is already there. It can launch, strike, and recover without touching another nation's soil. That level of autonomy is priceless in crisis scenarios where minutes matter. The next key advantage is multi-domain lethality. Naval integration gives the next-gen fighter direct access to carrier strike group sensors, massive arrays that far exceed the range of any onboard fighter radar. The carrier's early warning systems detect threats long before the fighter's sensors pick them up. The fighter then acts on shared information, turning every platform into an extension of its own awareness. This creates a collective intelligence that landlocked forces cannot match. This integration becomes even more important with manned-unmanned teaming. Naval aviation is moving toward carrier-launched drones acting as loyal wingmen, controlled by the next-gen fighter. A fighter paired with autonomous drones multiplies its reach, its strike options, and its survivability. Drones can scout ahead, jam enemy systems, or act as decoys. Landlocked adversaries cannot deploy them at sea with the same flexibility. Survivability is another layer of advantage. A carrier strike group has multiple defensive rings. A landlocked adversary can defend its bases, but it cannot move them. Once an enemy fixes their coordinates, they become targets. A carrier's best defense is movement. It can reposition hundreds of miles overnight, forcing adversaries to guess its next location. That uncertainty denies the enemy confidence. Naval integration transforms a next-gen fighter from a machine into a global instrument of power. It gives the fighter the freedom to appear anywhere, the reach to shape events before they escalate, the awareness to see threats before they strike, and the protection of a full carrier strike group behind it. Landlocked adversaries cannot replicate this because they are bound by geography and limited runways. Naval integration is the defining advantage. It allows a next-gen fighter to dominate contested seas and respond instantly to crises across the globe. The capability of a next-generation fighter jet to launch from both traditional runways and aircraft carriers solves some of the most serious logistical problems in modern air power. A fighter that can do both breaks the chain that restricted past aircraft to one environment. That single change instantly rewrites how fast, how flexibly, and how safely a nation can project power in a crisis. The core problem has always been distance. When jets must fly from land bases hundreds or thousands of kilometers away from contested areas, everything slows down. The response time increases. The need for aerial refueling multiplies. A fighter that can launch from a carrier shortens the distance dramatically. It reduces refueling needs, increases mission tempo, and eliminates the long, fragile logistics chain. The solution is survival. Future contested theaters will be filled with long-range missiles that target runways. Land bases are predictable. Carrier positions are not. A fighter that can use both environments creates a level of flexibility called operational resilience. It means the jet can survive even when one entire category of launch platform is compromised. The dual launch fighter removes that weakness at the root. The dual launch fighter gives commanders the power to rapidly shift squadrons between land and sea. When political tensions rise and airfields become unavailable, the jets move to the carrier. When the carrier is threatened or needs resupply, the jets move to land. This constant mobility creates pressure on the adversary because their targeting calculations never settle. They must search for jets that might be on the sea today and on land tomorrow. Confusion becomes a weapon. Distributed operations are moving towards smaller, dispersed units operating from temporary airstrips, remote bases, and carrier decks. The goal is to create a web of unpredictable launch points. A dual launch fighter becomes the perfect tool for this strategy because it can fly from a rough runway today, a carrier deck tomorrow, and a partner nation's airbase next week. This keeps the enemy guessing, stretches their surveillance networks thin, and forces them to defend a much larger area than before. Dual launch capability means faster response, greater reach, stronger survivability, and deeper logistical resilience. It solves the problems that crippled past air campaigns: dependence on fixed infrastructure, slow transit times, and predictable deployment patterns. It removes the frustration of distance, the fear of losing runways, and the complexity of trying to operate from a single environment. The ability to launch from both runways and carriers becomes a strategy of freedom. It signals that future conflicts will not be shaped by geography, but by adaptability. The dual environment certification of next-generation fighters will reshape joint Navy-Air Force tactics. Once a fighter is certified to operate in both worlds, the walls separating the two forces start to fall. The aircraft becomes a shared tool. The battlefield becomes a shared domain where air and sea power merge into a single, flexible strike system. In an A2AD bubble, nothing is safe. But when a fighter can operate in both environments, the force becomes resilient. The jet can disperse, move, hide, and reappear where it is least expected. This gives the joint force continuity even when the first blow lands. Adversaries are building layered defense systems designed to deny access. They want to close seas, deny air corridors, and force U.S. forces to fight from far away. The solution is to create fighters that are not tied to a single environment. A fighter that can take off from a forward land strip today and from a carrier deck tomorrow breaks the enemy's model. It makes their long-range missiles less effective. It forces them to cover a wider area. It complicates every targeting calculation they rely on. Dual environment fighters fit directly into the strategy of JADC2, which links every sensor to every shooter. Dual environment fighters are data nodes. They gather information from ships, satellites, drones, land units, and forward sensors. They feed that information back into a shared picture of the battlefield. They help coordinate strikes and suppress air defenses. Because they can launch from multiple environments, they can be placed exactly where the joint force needs the most awareness. Understanding is power. Adversaries rely on predictability. When a fighter becomes unpredictable, their entire model collapses. They cannot know whether threats are coming from inland bases, island strips, carriers, or forward staging areas. Their radar networks must search wider. Dual environment capability pushes the enemy into a reactive position, and reactive forces always lose tempo. Dual environment certification is a strategic shift. It links Navy carrier power with Air Force global reach. It creates a single, unified strike ecosystem that moves across land and sea without pause. It gives commanders more choices. It gives adversaries more problems. It sets the stage for next-generation fighters that will be judged by how seamlessly they merge into a joint force that covers every domain. This is about unity, speed, unpredictability, and the future of power projection in the most dangerous theaters on Earth. What you've seen is only the beginning. America's power is just getting started. On your screen is the next video. Click the video, it opens right away. And you'll watch US jets and technology strike even harder,